Wuxia. Opening reward full-level divine skill introduction. Xuanwu travels to the world of martial arts and takes over a nearly bankrupt escort agency. The martial arts world is fierce and turbulent. He didn't want to mix up with the world, but unexpectedly got a escort system. As long as the escort is successful, you can receive rewards. Escort successfully received, reward. Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita Skill is greatly completed. Escort successfully received, reward. 13 Deadly Swords. Escort successfully, reward. Tathagata Palm. With a heart-wrenching artistic career, it has stirred up towering storms. From the moment Xuanwu stepped into the martial arts world, it was no longer peaceful. Chapter 1. Great Perfection of Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Xianxia City. At this time, it happened to be noon, and the crowd in the big city was surging. People were buying and selling along the streets, and there was everything they could negotiate, making it lively and bustling. Under the city gate, a young scholar was bowing to a young man. "Thank you, Brother Su, for protecting me all the way to Xianxia City." The young man, however, looked drowsy, as if he had not heard the scholar's words. The scholar thought for a moment and suddenly realized. He took out a handful of scattered silver from between his sleeves and handed it over. "Brother Su, this is escort silver. Please accept it with a smile." "Ah." The young man only woke up from a dream at this moment, laughed heartily, and casually took the silver. He counted each one and confirmed that the amount was correct. Then he smiled and said, Okay, the money and goods are settled. Wishing Brother Li a bright future." The scholar surnamed Li gave a bitter smile, as if he had 1,000 words to say, but in the end, he only let out a long sigh. "With your kind words, let's say goodbye. Please." The young man saluted solemnly, and the scholar turned around to bid farewell, merging into the crowd and disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. The young man watched him disappear into the sea of people in Xianxia City, then shook the silver in his hand and sighed lightly. "I traveled all the way from Wuxia City to Xianxia City, where people ate horses, chewed wind food, and slept outdoors, earning only 5 taels of silver. Oh, it's difficult to do business these days. But forget it, everything is difficult at the beginning. With this head, the days ahead cannot be said to be much better." He originally wanted to turn around and leave Xianxia City, and return to Wuxia City. "I just didn't know what was on my mind, but I stopped and turned to enter the vast Xianxia City. I opened a room in a small inn and rested for the time being." After seeing off the second brother, he sat on the bedboard and with a thought, a panel popped up in front of him. Escort System, Host. Xuanwu, Escort Agency. Xiang Escort Agency, Task. Escort Li Yishu to visit relatives in Xianxia City, completed, reward. Settlement in progress. Su Mo's lips twitched and he said, "As soon as I entered Xianxia City, I started settling accounts. I've been searching for the inn all the way, and it took me a long time to figure it out. Surprisingly, the settlement hasn't been completed yet. Your system is not very good." After complaining, Xuanwu flipped over and casually pushed open the window. "I was planning to see the bustling scene of crowds rushing down Xianxia City Street. But I forgot that I only opened a room with a floor code, even though it was one for each person. There were simple furniture decorations in the room. But if you can see the street view outside by opening the window, at least a room with a sky size would have such treatment." After he opened it, he happened to see the stable behind the inn, and a strange smell of horse manure mixed with hay rushed towards him. Xuanwu quickly closed the window and shook his head helplessly. "I wanted to pour myself a cup of tea to moisten my throat, but when I brought up the teapot, it was empty inside." She put down the teapot in a casual manner and picked up a teacup to play with, but her eyes were slightly empty. He was originally a great modern youth, but for some reason, he suddenly traveled to such a world of martial arts. And he also inherited an escort agency. The escort agency is called Xiang Escort Agency and is an ancestral property of the Su family. 3 generations ago, Su Qingyu, the prince of Su Mo, coincidentally joined the Xiang sect and learned all the martial arts of the sect. After completing his studies, he opened such a Xiang escort agency under the name of Xiang Gate. To say this Xiang escort agency, it is also extraordinary. There was also a glorious past back then. At its peak, both black and white gave face, and its footprints covered most of the eastern wilderness. Although I dare not say it is the first escort agency in Donghuang, it is also one of the few major escort agencies. But that was all the glory of our predecessors, and later our family began to decline. In short, it means that one generation is not as good as another. When I came to Sumo's father's side, I died tragically in the martial arts world because of a trip to escort. Sumo's mother also died of depression shortly after her husband's death. Su Mo was still young and inexperienced at that time. Although he left behind a lot of wealth, he could not withstand the corruption of his unworthy descendants. In addition, his martial arts were low and he was cunning, lazy, and slippery. In the end, the flag of the Xiang escort agency was still unable to resist. So much so that his disciples scattered, leaving only him and a loyal old servant to maintain the vast escort agency. With that skill, Su Mo traveled through time and replaced the original owner, becoming the chief escort of the Xiang escort agency. Of course, being the chief bodyguard is just a bare rod commander. According to Su Mo's original idea, it was to take advantage of having some extra money at home and quickly think of another way. With his knowledge and ability as a traveler, it was not difficult to have a full meal. Unexpectedly, a system suddenly popped up. After struggling for a few days, Su Mo finally decided to continue lifting the already drooping dart flag. On the day when the decision was made, the old servant was filled with tears of excitement, lamenting that the young master had finally grown up. But Su Mo knew that the path of the martial arts world was not so easy to follow. And with the reputation of this escort agency already in ruins, it's not that simple to want Yang Wei back. Therefore, every day we either diligently practice our family's martial arts, or browse through the letters left by our ancestors, gain knowledge in the martial arts world, learn some slang, and quietly wait for opportunities. If there is really a dart knocking on the door, you won't be beaten to the ground by 3 or 2 thieves after going out. Perhaps hard work pays off for those who have a heart, but when I went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, someone actually found this already declining Xiang escort agency. This also made Su Mo's first dart. Protect this Li Yishu and head to Jinyang City. After pondering all the way to this point, the sound of knocking on the door rang out in time, waking Su Mo up. He stood up to inquire, but the waiter came to deliver hot water. I sent away my second brother and brewed myself a pot of hot tea. Just as I was about to take a sip, a sound came from my ear. Initial settlement completed. Ouch! Su Mo's heart was filled with joy, as the rivers and lakes were full of storms and twists and turns. His entire reliance on wandering in the martial arts world in the future is not solely on his half-hearted family martial arts skills, but his greatest reliance is still on this golden finger. Immediately put down the teacup, and then heard another sound. Reward. The Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita Skill has been greatly completed. Su Mo's whole body trembled, and before he could recover, he felt a sudden surge of internal power rising from the dantian, continuous and flowing into his limbs and bones along the meridians. At the same moment, vast texts rushed forward, and it was the practice formula of the Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita technique. Immediately flew to the bedside and sat cross-legged, following the law. With the foundation of the elixir field as the foundation, one can walk up the 12 heavenly towers and enter the 12th canon with all one's internal strength. One can only hear the constant sound of explosive sounds in the body, and the temples jump and jump. After walking along the 12 meridians and fully penetrating the acupoints, internal energy naturally flowed into the 8 extraordinary meridians. Rendu's 2 meridians bear the brunt and pass through consistently. The Hongqiao Bridge of Heaven and Earth, the Gateway of Life and Death, and the Ren Governor's 2 meridians of martial arts practitioners, were effortlessly connected in this moment. Chapter 2. Door-to-Door Sales. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita technique is the supreme skill of esoteric Buddhism. For every level of cultivation, it is said that there is a power of 1 dragon and 1 elephant, and for every level of cultivation, there is a great power of 10 dragons and 10 elephants. However, the reward Xuanwu received was a perfect 13-fold. This realm cannot be achieved by human resources. Because in terms of practicing Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita, there are not many other difficulties, but one thing. That is time. It takes 2 years for an ordinary person to complete the first level, but 4 years for the second level, 8 years for the third level, and so on. And so on. What kind of person can have a lifespan of thousands of years to achieve those 13 levels of perfection? Even though they are talented individuals who practice much faster than ordinary people, even so, they can only achieve the top 10 realms in their lifetime of hardship. Only Xuanwu, with the help of system rewards, leaped over the gate of dragons and fish in a day, reaching an unprecedented level. However, even so, Xuanwu spent a full night absorbing all his internal strength. From then on, sending and receiving as you please, everything goes smoothly. With a long breath, Xuanwu suddenly opened his eyes, causing his empty room to turn white. Fortunately, this spectacle was only a fleeting moment and not seen by anyone. Otherwise, why wait for another day in the world-renowned world? This is the Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita Skill. Xuanwu stood up and felt his internal strength, feeling satisfied for a moment. With this martial arts skill, it may only be a matter of time for my escort agency to grow. But the martial arts world is dangerous and eerie. Even if the Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita Skill, which is a perfect level, is facing the enemy head-on, there is no need to worry about anything, but one must be careful not to use ghost tricks such as secret schemes. During this period of time, he flipped through the letters of his ancestors and had a deep impression of the mysterious world described in them. In the martial arts world, there are many teachings and 9 streams. Some people are unable to defeat their opponents in the open and conspire in the dark, which is truly beyond defense. There are multiple records in the letter of how a master was ambushed by cunning villains, resulting in defeat and death. It can be said that it is impossible to prevent. In just a moment, Xuanwu was already secretly warning himself not to take it lightly. I probably tidied up my things, took a sip of tea that had been cold all night, and then went downstairs to eat something. He had nothing else to do in Jinyang City. After delivering Li Yishu to the place, he could have directly returned to Wuxia City. But because this system has not been settled and it is the first time to receive rewards, I have to be slightly prepared, which delayed the night. At this point, the reward has already been collected. Of course, you need to drive the horse back to the city. However, people eat horses and chew is just a description. When he and Li Yishu arrived, they crossed mountains and ridges with their legs, and when they returned, he did not intend to gallop on horseback. How expensive the horse is. The beginning of everything is difficult, so at this stage, if you can save it, save it. Xuanwu muttered incessantly and left the city like this, heading towards the Sunset City with a slight recognition of the direction. The sky was just right. By the side of the avenue, Xuanwu found a comfortable spot to lean against the tree trunk and eat dry food. After driving all morning, Xuanwu actually realized the benefits of this Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita technique. Previously, his internal strength was shallow, and he was often tired when traveling. Fortunately, Li Yishu was an ordinary scholar with no strength in his hands, so he couldn't feel his weakness. However, with the Dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita technique, I ran down in the morning feeling full of energy, as if I had nowhere to go. If it weren't for being hungry, he felt like he could run back to Wuxia city in one breath. I took a bite of the pancake in my hand and swallowed it with clean water. Although it wasn't very delicious, it could still fill my stomach. Ignoring the situation, my ears twitched, but I couldn't help but turn my head and look back when I heard some movement coming from within the forest. However, after waiting for a moment or three, he ate more than half of a cake before finally seeing a man dressed in black. This person has a thin appearance, a disheveled physique, and fierce eyes. With a flicker of his gaze, he saw Xuanwu. His eyebrows and corners of his eyes lightly twitched. He was surprised, but he couldn't believe there was still someone here. However, after a moment, the person suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and walked straight towards Xuanwu. Xuanwu's eyebrows furrowed slightly, and as soon as the person approached, he smelled the bloody smell from the other person's body. This kind of person often means trouble. When traveling in the world, it's best to stay away from trouble. Unexpectedly, before Xuanwu could get up and move away, the person had already fallen to the ground with a thud. Xuanwu was greatly surprised and said, "Why do you perform this great gift?" The black-clothed man's mouth twitched, and before he could speak, he spewed out a mouthful of blood, already as angry as a thread. "Are you from the Xiang escort agency?" Xuanwu lowered his head and looked at the words Xiang on his sleeve, suddenly realizing it. Without waiting for Xuanwu to speak, the man in black suddenly took out a brocade box from his pocket and threw it to Xuanwu. "Please kindly deliver this item to the Yuchuan Inn of Jiming Post House and give it to a person named Wang Xianglin. After the matter is completed, there will be a heavy thank you. Task: send the brocade box to Wang Xianglin at the Yuchuan Inn of Jiming Post. Do you want to pick it up? Is this second task coming so fast?" Xuanwu, however, was somewhat conflicted. Zhaozuiyuan.com. The Jiming Post is not far, although it's not very convenient. It's just a delay of a few days before and after. What troubles Xuanwu is that this escort is clearly very dangerous. Although thanking someone for something is quite tempting, getting caught up in a conflict without knowing anything is definitely putting oneself under a dangerous wall. Although Xuanwu had just emerged from the martial arts world, he was well aware of the principle of being careful when sailing a ship for thousands of years, and he was a bit indecisive for a moment. Without waiting for him to make a decision, the man in black suddenly felt weak all over, and he was so angry on the spot. This. Xuanwu was stunned. How could he die so decisively? After pondering for a moment, he stood up, put the pancake in his backpack, and carried the brocade box to the body of the black-clothed man. He put on deer-skin gloves to guard against the possibility of the body being poisonous, and then turned the body around. Upon closer inspection, I feel that this person died unjustly. There are countless knife and sword injuries all over my body, and the position of my heart is even more prone to skin and flesh collapse. It is obvious that I was injured by someone using heavy techniques. It is already a miracle that this person can persist and stay by their side all the way. Those who use swords, and those who are skilled in internal martial arts have many opponents. This transaction is indeed a hassle, and there is not even a deposit, so it's better not to accept it. As Xuanwu muttered to himself, footsteps could already be heard in his ear. I heard a voice jokingly say, "That's right, that's right. This kind of headless business, even if I do it, I'm afraid it will be headless. If it were me, I wouldn't accept it either." Chapter 3. Receiving Tasks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Not bad, not bad. If I do this headless business, I'm afraid it will also be headless. If it were me, I wouldn't accept it either. The sound came from the side of the body. Xuanwu turned his head to look, but it was a young man with a single sword at his waist, with a gentle smile on his face. Seeing Xuanwu looking at him, the young man smiled again and said, "Since you're not planning to take this escort, why don't you give me this brocade box instead? It's also good." Without hesitation, Xuanwu picked up the brocade box and threw it to the young man. The young man quickly put the brocade box into his palm, and his palms trembled slightly. He laughed heartily. Okay, it's really enjoyable. Besides, I have another heartfelt request. Tell me what. I'm not sure if it's possible to borrow your head. As he spoke, he saw a flash of his sword's edge, which had already reached Su Mo's neck. Since this young man appeared, Su Mo has not been allowed to live. They killed and looted treasures, and their actions were extremely covert. Not to mention that Su Mo had already seen and obtained this brocade box. Even if he only saw the description of the man in black, it was already a way to take death. Otherwise, Su Mo has already said that he doesn't plan to take this escort or cause this trouble. Why not wait for Su Mo to leave and take away the brocade box, and everyone will be happy. Therefore, this young man was originally rushing to kill. Whether Su Mo gives this brocade box or not, there is no difference in whether Su Mo accepts or not this escort. The knives used by young people are good, and the techniques used are also good. They are also very agile in killing and beheading. Moreover, he had previously used a smile and gentle tone to numb Su Mo. This knife shouldn't have been an accident. However, this knife happened to be an accident. The blade hovered an inch in front of Su Mo's neck, making it difficult to penetrate even a single inch. Guy tightly grasped the blade with 2 fingers. I've already said that I don't plan on taking the escort anymore. I've given you a chance, why do you have to come out? Su Mo sighed. He was covered in the dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita technique to protect his body, and his internal skills had reached an incredible level. Before the young man could approach him, he had already heard the movement. That self-talk, saying that he didn't plan to take the escort, was also meant for him to listen to. The purpose is nothing more than to point out that one does not intend to get involved in this dispute. If the other party takes a step back and doesn't have the intention of killing and silencing, then Su Mo will really put down the brocade box and turn around to leave. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. But I heard a bang, and the good knife was forcefully broken by Su Mo's 2 fingers. The young man's tiger mouth trembled and was already torn apart. Blood flowed down the handle of the knife, but he didn't even bother to take a glance. Who would have thought that a small person who could be easily killed would be so unfathomable? I'm about to step back immediately, my movements are incredibly fast. However, he is fast, but Su Mo is faster than him. Since there is no room for maneuver, Su Mo's hands are even more merciless. With a twist of the blade and a flick of the hand, the half-blade suddenly ran like lightning, straight towards the young man's throat. The young man, on the other hand, had extraordinary martial arts skills. He raised a half-cut single sword and placed it horizontally in front of his neck, not only with the intention of blocking the blow, but also with the intention of using the opportunity to counterattack. However, countless considerations cannot withstand the cruelty of reality. The blade suddenly pierced through the blade that stood in front of the throat, passing through the young man's throat without saying a word. The remaining force did not stop, and it headed straight towards the trees behind him. After running through 3 large trees in a series, it finally stopped on the 4th tree, and the half-blade had already been completely buried inside the tree. The young man still maintained the posture of holding a single sword and blocking his neck, with a hint of fear in his eyes, but he had already passed away. Su Mo stood up and walked up to the young man, but sighed and said, "Why did this come so hard? I casually brought back the brocade box, which was not big enough to be carried in my luggage." The light of the eyes gently twirled in the forest, then withdrew and sighed. "Anyway, let's take a trip to Jiming Post House. The wind and rain in the martial arts world come and go in a hurry. Since we can't avoid it, let's move forward." After packing up his luggage and carrying it on his body, he distinguished the direction of the Jiming post before leaving. In less than a cup of tea, Su Mo saw a few people appear. "You say, did he find us?" It's hard to say, his final gaze is thought-provoking. 2 fingers of a broken knife, the blade piercing through the blade of one knife and a person's throat and neck, and able to penetrate 3 large trees and nail them onto the body of the 4th tree. This person. How powerful. Humph, don't try to boost others' morale or undermine your own authority. You're just a novice kid, let's see how I can get it. Ha, that's naturally because you have many means and cannot defend against it. After a brief inspection, a few people did not stay long and rushed over in the direction of Su Mo's departure. I didn't even take a closer look at the bodies of the young man and the man in black. Zhaozuiyuan.com. And not long after the few of them had left, another person emerged from the forest. Watching several people leave in the direction, still holding a pancake in his hand and gnawing on it. Praying mantis catching cicadas, yellow sparrows behind. Play this trick with me. After taking a sip of clean water, Su Mo swallowed the pancake and said, however, I was planning to secretly listen and see what's going on with you guys. But I didn't expect you to keep silent. However, since you missed the treasure, it has actually been much easier. In this case, this deal may not be impossible either. When Su Mo left just now, he already knew that there were Tibetans in the forest. This was taken for granted. The man in black has knife, sword, and fist and foot injuries on his body. Conservatively estimate that there are at least 3 or more people besieging him. How come only one wielding a knife comes out, and there is no follow-up for the rest? So, Su Mo was just walking to show them. In the dark, he circled back, but turned the light into darkness, intending to see the true face of the person hidden in the darkness. In a moment of contemplation, Su Mo's thoughts moved and the message in front of him resurfaced. Task. Send the brocade box to Wang Xianglin at the Yuchuan Inn of Jiming Post. Do you want to pick it up? Today's incident can be considered a collision, whether involuntarily or not, it has already been caught up in this vortex. With this skill, even if they throw away the brocade box and turn around and leave, the 4 words, Xiang Escort Agency, have already entered their vision. If they cannot find me, they naturally have to find Xiang Escort Agency. This can be considered as being able to run, but not the temple. Since that's the case, let's just have fun and have fun. With a certain mindset, Su Mo bent his finger and said, take it. Chapter 4. Night Encounter. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. On the perilous mountain and wilderness road, a young man leaped and crossed the mountains like walking on a flat ground. As long as I deepen my internal skills, I can definitely achieve twice the result with half the effort. The lightness skill of Xiang Gates Ping Xing Doing used to only allow me to unleash a few mysteries, but now with the help of my internal strength, it has been completely transformed. This person is none other than Su Mo. After taking on the task, I naturally have to rush to Jiming Post. He pretended to leave earlier, but it was just a cover-up. In fact, he turned back and secretly investigated the people hidden in the dark. However, this time it fell behind these people. In order to avoid being noticed by the other party, Su Mo had to take a different approach and use his lightness skills to move around and get back in front of these people, only then could he truly be unaware of them. In a situation where the enemy and we are already aware but the information is completely unequal, no matter what means the other party uses, Su Mo can easily resolve it. Just deliver this thing to the person named Wang Xianglin at Jiming Post under their watchful eye. This matter, even if it has nothing to do with Su Mo. No matter how many disputes there may be in the future, it will be the problem of Wang Xianglin and this group of people. And he himself, if he has escort silver, then he earns silver. Without escort silver, there are rewards for system tasks, so how can he calculate that he can earn without losing? This is the way to protect oneself by wandering in the martial arts world. Otherwise, just killing these few people. Not to mention whether it is easy, even if it is really killing, it may not be safe. There is still a possibility of coming to your door for any further trouble. Only by truly getting rid of this trouble can we be the best solution. After a slight pause under his feet, he roughly surveyed the surrounding environment and estimated, "I've walked 40 or 50 miles this time, so I should have already circled in front of them." Immediately discern the path, and in a moment, you have arrived at a desolate ancient path between mountains and forests. Following this path, following my original itinerary, traveling day and night, I should be able to reach Jiming Post after walking for 4 more days. Gently exhaling a breath, Xuanwu continued to hustle on. Time flies by, the sun slants westward, the tree shadows sway and tug at the old man, and the red clouds on the horizon are dyed. Although it is not yet autumn, there is still a faint sense of desolation. Not long after, a small tea shop suddenly appeared on the roadside in the mountains and fields. Sumo's eyebrows twitched slightly and he said, "Isn't this just here? The ancient road is wild and bustling, and it is not a place for peaceful living. Imagine, who would open a tea shop in such a rarely visited place? Are you not afraid of people from the past harboring evil intentions, killing and robbing money? Therefore, these desolate tea and wine shops are often quite dangerous. I accidentally fell into the black shop and became a fat sheep on their chopping board." However, Xuanwu knew that there were tigers on the mountain and leaned towards the tiger mountain. However, when he came to this tea shop, he knew he had guessed wrong. He didn't guess the beginning wrong, he guessed the ending wrong. The tea shop is not big, with several tables scattered on the side. A corpse lay on the counter, with a knife piercing through its neck. The blade not only penetrated his neck, but also the counter, and blood dripped down the tip of the blade to the ground. The corpse's eyes were wide open, maintaining the fear in their eyes before death. This person Xuanwu knows. It was one of the people who secretly spied on him before. Also because of this, Xuanwu did not guess the beginning wrong. This person is obviously setting up such a tea shop here to wait for him to come and invite the emperor into the urn. However, he guessed the ending incorrectly. He had already thought of several ways to deal with it, but he never expected that none of these methods would be useful. Because he never imagined that someone would kill him before this. Who did it? Xuanwu stood still, lost in thought. After a moment of silence, he bypassed the corpse and arrived at the tea shop. Here, there are still 2 corpses. However, compared to the one outside, these 2 corpses are much more dignified. They were killed by people, but they were neatly arranged side by side. Judging from the description of the body, the time of death was actually longer than that of the person outside. Not the same person did it. So, they were the original owners of this tea shop. Xuanwu outlined a result in his heart, which can be considered as solving a doubt. I thought I had walked in front of them, but this person walked in front of me again. Coincidentally, there was a tea shop by the mountain road, so after killing someone, the dove occupied the magpie's nest and waited quietly for me to bring it to my door. I'll just say, even if you have a divine ability, how could you build such a tea shop out of nothing in a short period of time? But for some unknown reason, someone had rampaged and even stabbed him to death on this counter. That's interesting. Who did this? You don't leave a name for good deeds, at least keep a diary, right? He shook his head slightly, but for a moment he was unsure of what was going on. However, a few possible speculations arose in his heart, but it was futile to say too much. After wandering around in and out of this tea shop, searching for the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com but not finding any clues, Xuanwu simply ignored it and continued on his journey. There are many things in the world that cannot be explained clearly, and there are many things that cannot be understood. As the saying goes, don't be surprised when you see something strange, it will defeat itself. No matter who did this and for what reason, if it were done for oneself, one would eventually appear. This skill is really not wise, as it causes chaos and confusion. After leaving this tea shop and continuing on the way to Jiming Post, the sky began to darken. Xuanwu didn't walk at night either, and for a moment he couldn't find any place to rest, such as a dilapidated temple. Instead, he found a suitable place on the spot and started a fire. I heated the pancake in my backpack over the fire and started eating it with water. Tomorrow, passing by the town, I will buy a roasted chicken and prepare it for anything I say. Eating this pancake every day is really tasteless. As he spoke, he sniffed his nose and a scent of meat wafted into his nostrils with the night breeze. Xuanwu was stunned and said, "Did you encounter a soft pillow when you were dozing off? How could you say roasted chicken and smell the aroma of meat?" In a moment, I saw a person walking unsteadily from the darkness. Under the firelight, it can be seen that this person is quite old. His hair was messy, his clothes were ragged, and he had a huge red gourd hanging from his waist. He shook it 3 times as he walked. He held a wooden stick in his left hand, but a roasted chicken in his right hand, nibbling on it as he walked. When he arrived at the flames, he didn't even glance at Xuanwu, so he sat down straight. I casually put the roasted chicken aside, untied the red gourd from my waist, and the alcohol instantly dissipated. The person looked up and drank wildly, finally taking a deep breath. "Good wine." As the words fell, I glanced at Xuanwu. "Do you dare to drink?" Chapter 5. 1 Discord. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The martial arts world is full of heroes, wielding swords in green robes and indulging in unrestrained freedom. There is a heroic spirit of drinking big bowls and eating large chunks of meat. Dao Zhuo encountered him by chance, drinking a pot of turbid wine, and even half a liang of words in his life. He also had a free and unrestrained spirit in it. In theory, Xuanwu should not refuse. However, he was very happy. "I dare not." Where and where, just ask yourself if you dare. Who knows who this person is? What is the purpose of coming here? Is there still Xuanwu in this wine? What kind of wine do you drink for no reason? There is a saying in the profession of bodyguards that they regard as the golden rule. That's 3 guarantees for safety. The so-called 3-part guarantee of safety is: to bring a 3-part smile, let 3 parts manage, and drink 3 parts wine. And the last one, in fact, is the ability to not drink alcohol. Drinking alcohol can cause trouble, unless it is extremely cold and the earth is cold. Drinking alcohol to keep warm is only enough to drink 10%, and one must avoid the contents of this cup. At this time, the season is already summer, and Xuanwu is not only young and strong, but also protected by the dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita Divine Skill. How could one drink the wine handed over by an unknown person without even bringing it with them? The person across from him squinted his eyes slightly and said with a hint of sharpness, "Are you afraid that this wine is poisonous?" "Yes." The person fell silent for a moment, not knowing how to proceed. How could it be so straightforward? At that moment, he withdrew his hand and said, "You are blind. I am a treasure in the gourd, but it is useless for you to drink it." Xuanwu sneered, just nibbling on his pancake. The person who came didn't know what their origin was, so they drank heavily in front of Xuanwu and ate roasted chicken one by one. So much so that bones were thrown all over the ground. After drinking too much, he even went crazy and got up to curse the heavens and the earth. "Hate the injustice of heaven, hate the injustice of the earth, hate the many wrong paths in the world." In an instant, my tongue bloomed like a lotus flower, and Xuanwu was stunned. Where did this crazy person come from? This was not what Xuanwu said. The speaker is right across from Xuanwu at this moment. Hold hands in your arms, holding a sword in your arms. The sword is very long. An ordinary person's sword is more than 3 feet long, but this person's sword is 7 feet long. The sword is long and straight. People also stand straight. Just like the sword in his hand. This person came very quickly. When Xuanwu heard this person's movements, he was still a few miles away, but suddenly he had already drifted in. Holding a sword in his hand, he spoke sarcastically. But it is difficult for Xuanwu to disagree with his words. This drunken man really looks like a madman. However, even if you are really crazy, you may not like to be called that way in person. So, he suddenly stood up and looked at the person holding the sword. What are you saying? Saying you're crazy. You're right. Just know. Just treat it as a reward. What should I reward? Appreciate wine. At this point, the wine gourd suddenly flew out of the air, howling and carrying the strong wind that tore through the void, heading straight towards the person holding the sword. The person's eyebrows slightly raised, with one hand still holding the sword in his arms, while the other hand pressed weakly. The wine gourd immediately stood in front of him in the void 2 feet away, constantly spinning but unable to make any progress. Xuanwu silently hugged his pancake and stepped back. It is common in the martial arts world for the Daozhua to meet and have a big fight when they don't agree. Watching from the sidelines doesn't matter, the main thing is not to splash blood. I have never liked drinking alcohol in my life, I'll give it to you. The person holding the sword suddenly stomped his foot lightly on the ground with one foot. As his breath flowed, his sleeve moved without wind. The gourd spinning in mid-air suddenly shot away in the opposite direction. But I saw the drunken man who was throwing wine crazily, his body quickly approaching him. Without waiting for the wine gourd to carry a huge force, I had already grabbed it in my hand. Even so, it was still driven by the force attached to it and turned around in place. He didn't panic either, taking advantage of the situation and lifting his hand was like a stick. Toast, don't eat, fine. This stick technique is eerie, and suddenly, all over the sky and fields are covered in stick shadows. Great method. The sword-wielding person's eyes lit up and he dared not neglect, so he immediately withdrew and retreated. He has evidence to advance and retreat, only 3 feet away. All the shadows of the stick in the sky are silent on the front line, but the distance between the lines is far from the end of the world. And at this moment, the stick's shadow suddenly turned, condensed a little, and poked at the heart to find a hole. Remove the sheath. The person holding the sword let out a soft drink, and in the midst of a burst of internal energy, the long sword suddenly left its sheath in his arms. The 7-foot-long sword spun in mid-air, its tip touching the stick head on. Only a buzzing sound was heard, and both sword energy and internal power shot away. Crash, the unfamiliar fire of Su suddenly made a hunting sound and shone brightly. Looking up again, the 2 people in front of me were already fighting fiercely. The person holding the sword holds a 7-foot-long sword, with strange and ruthless moves in both directions. But the stick in the hand of the drunken man flipped up and down, suddenly on the left and then on the right. His feet were ethereal and elusive, seemingly mysterious but still composed. What Xuanwu learned himself was the Xiang sect martial arts passed down from his family. However, the original owner was negligent, and although he was diligent in his side, he only wished that the cultivation time was too short when looking for the book garden www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. Watching the 2 people in front of me make a move, I suddenly felt that I had benefited a lot. However, despite benefiting a lot, Xuanwu did not hesitate at all. After packing his bags, he turned around and left. These 2 people have an unknown origin, and their fight is also inexplicable. Don't look at the hustle and bustle without a clear understanding, otherwise you may accidentally become the hustle and bustle in the eyes of others. He withdrew and walked away in a blink of an eye. Looking back, he had already thrown the flames and the sound of a fight several miles away. Gently shaking his head, he said, I was planning to take a good rest and continue on my journey tomorrow morning. However, I didn't expect to be disturbed by 2 crazy people. It's just that I won't sleep anymore. This brocade box is a hot potato. I'll give it to that person named Wang Xianglin as soon as possible. Make a decision, without hesitation, and immediately continue on the journey. That night at dawn, the next morning, we were surprisingly safe and sound. It surprised Xuanwu a bit. He always felt that those two people last night were also related to this brocade box. I pondered that there might be some follow-up to this night. But I didn't expect that the following text would just disappear. At this moment, looking up, a town had already caught the eye. I immediately stopped thinking about last night's events and went to the town to buy some food and drink before speaking. If there were words, they would be long; if there were no words, they would be short. In the blink of an eye, Xuanwu had already arrived at that town. Looking up, I saw three big characters. Wang Township. Stepping inside, as soon as I arrived at the town gate, I saw a servant watching from side to side. After seeing myself, I looked at him carefully for a moment before welcoming him with a surprised expression on my face. "Excuse me, but is your surname Su?" Chapter 6. Invitation. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Excuse me, but is your surname Su? The servant approached Xuanwu and carefully examined for a moment before respectfully asking. Xuanwu looked at him thoughtfully, then smiled lightly and said, "I am surnamed Su, but how do you know?" "Great, it's really Mr. Su." The servant quickly said, "Yesterday evening, an old man arrived at the Wuxia building in our Wang Township and ordered a first-class banquet. He opened a heavenly room. However, there was another order, saying that tomorrow morning and evening, an old man named Su would pass by this Wang Township. This banquet was arranged for this old man named Su. Let's wait here in person, and see a handsome sword eyebrow and starry figure, dressed in a strong blue shirt and embroidered with the words Xiang on the cuffs. It's this Mr. Su. 1,000 reminders and admonitions, let's never neglect it. Uncle Su, do you think we should go with you? Our Wuxia Tower is located in Wuxia Township." Xuanwu smiled and asked, "Excuse me, young man. Do you remember what the old man who came to your restaurant yesterday looked like?" "This." The servant was stunned and seemed to have some reservations for a moment. Xuanwu, however, couldn't help but laugh and cry and said, "What's there to hesitate about here? Since he ordered a first-class banquet, he naturally met me. But I don't know which old friend treated me so warmly. Tell me about it, and I can remember my personal feelings. Isn't this world just about human relationships? When someone comes carrying a flower sedan chair, I can't make any further statements, can I? Grandpa's words make sense, it's because the young one thinks too much." The servant quickly said, "That old man is about 30 or 40 years old, with outstanding manners and exquisite clothing. We dare not say anything else about Xianxia. We have seen many gentry and wealthy families in Wuxia Township, but there are few who have such magnanimity. Although he speaks calmly, he has his own dignity, especially those eyes, which make people look at him. Just." He didn't seem to know how to describe it for a moment, and after a long search, he said, "I dare not disobey his orders." "Oh." Xuanwu raised his eyebrows and said, "Besides that." "Besides. By the way, there is a mole under his ear root with 3 strands of long beard. Mr. Su, do you remember an old friend who was so generous?" "So it's him." Xuanwu chuckled and said, "All right, you lead the way ahead." The servant nodded and dared not ask any more questions, so he had to lead the way ahead. On Sumo's side, he compared this person's image with several people he had seen in the small forest before, and it was one of those people. With a gentle smile, there was some calculation in my heart. In the previous wild tea shop, the person's death was strange and bizarre. Now their group has set up such a bureau in this Wang Township. Its purpose is almost self-evident. If it had changed before, Xuanwu might have taken a detour to avoid any unexpected complications. However, with the insights from the tea shop, he changed his mind. The servant led the way, and in a moment, the two had already arrived at a restaurant in the middle of the town. 3 big characters mentioned above. Xianxia. I don't know how the person arranged yesterday evening and how they used their methods. Su Mo was indeed treated as a guest of honor. The dining place was in the best wing on the second floor, accompanied by two young women who ordered the finest banquet. Not only were the ingredients exquisite, but they were also very exquisite. Su Mo smiled and invited the two women out of the room. He is not a true gentleman who can sit still, otherwise he wouldn't have invited people out. However, color is like a bone-scraping steel knife, especially in this world. The gentle hometown hero tomb is not just empty words. But after the wine and food were served, Su Mo tested them one by one. He is quite experienced in this area, and most of his letters contain techniques for verifying whether food is toxic. Su Mo studies this seriously, so he can be considered a half-expert. After confirming that it was non-toxic, Su Mo had the best meal at the best restaurant and room in Wang Township. However, the jar of daughter's red wine, which is said to have been aged for 30 years, has not touched his lips at all. Having had enough to eat and drink, Su Mo rested well for another morning in the rooftop room of this restaurant. I didn't wake up until noon. As soon as the person got up, someone was waiting outside the door. Gently knocking on the door, a sound enters the room. Mr. Su, be well. I have something to ask for a meeting. Come on in. Su Mo's eyebrows slightly raised, the door opened, and a young man entered. The person's body was slightly arched, with a humble and cautious attitude. Mr. Su, my master has invited me, and I would like to invite Mr. Su to come and appreciate it. Oh. But I don't know who your master is. Su Mo asked with a smile. The consumption of Mr. Su's clothes today is all a gift from the master. I see. Is this a plan to take advantage of your kindness? I dare not. The person quickly said, my master respects young rangers the most in his daily life. Su, who is already the chief bodyguard of the Xiang escort agency at a young age, is the most respected young ranger in the book garden. After learning about this, my master respects him even more. That's why we have this invitation today. I would like to invite Su, who is very kind. Su Mo pondered for a moment, seeming quite perplexed, but finally sighed. Eating people has a short mouth, and the delicious food has already been eaten. When I wake up, I have already digested it completely, and I can't even vomit. I have already absorbed what needs to be endured. It's a bit unreasonable not to go see the host. That's all, then you just need to wait outside the door for a while, and I'll tidy up and go with you. After all, I also have something to ask your master about. Thank you very much, Mr. Su, for showing his respect. As he spoke, the young man bowed deeply, then turned around and walked out, casually closing the door. At this moment, Su Mo's mouth lit up with a smile and said, I thought I could eat and drink for free a few more times, but didn't I expect to be so anxious? I didn't pay much attention to what was inside this brocade box at first, but now I have 2 or 3 points of curiosity. However, the trick of using small favors to ultimately lure you into the jar really underestimated me. In martial arts novels, this type of plot is poorly written, right? After a moment of contemplation, he picked up his bag, tidied up his clothes, and pushed the door out. The young man breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Su Mo come out. Uncle Su, please come with me. Why do you seem to have breathed a sigh of relief? It's unlikely that someone has been secretly monitoring the area while waiting for me here. If I leave without saying goodbye. The young man was taken aback and instinctively looked up at Su Mo. Su Mo laughed heartily and said, You're quite interesting. I'm just joking with you. How could I tell from your expression that you seem to have taken it seriously? Chapter 7. Inside the Falling Flower Pavilion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There used to be a peach blossom forest outside Wang Township. During the season when peach blossoms bloom, the 10-mile peach blossoms are unforgettable. However, this is not the season when peach blossoms are in full bloom. So, only 10 miles of branches were left, a bit lonely. Between these peach blossom trees, there is a pavilion called the Falling Flower Pavilion. Watching the peach blossom rain fall and savoring the spring and autumn of the human world can also be considered unique. Xuanwu followed the young man and walked towards the Falling Flower Pavilion in the peach blossom forest. Before approaching, one could already hear the distant and majestic sound of the qin, with the sound of mountains and rocks. Moving forward, I saw a middle-aged man sitting in the pavilion, burying his head and playing the piano. A guqin, a furnace of incense. 3 strands of long beards move freely with the wind. The young man gestured to Xuanwu to wait for a moment before bidding farewell and leaving. Xuanwu smiled without interrupting the middle-aged man's fiddle movement, just listening quietly. After a while, the song came to an end. The middle-aged man reached out and held down the strings of the piano to stop the sound. In the faint smoke of the incense burner, he looked up at Xuanwu and smiled. "Xianxia, have you already arrived? I used the piano to relieve my frustration, but for a moment, I forgot my feelings and neglected. I dare not. Xuanwu waved his hand and said, after listening to a wonderful melody for nothing, I actually took advantage of it. Oh. The middle-aged man's eyebrows were tinged with a hint of joy and he said, "Xianxia, you are actually a kindred spirit. But I don't know where the beauty of this song lies." Xuanwu thought for a moment and sincerely said, "It sounds good." The middle-aged man was stunned, obviously not expecting Xuanwu's answer to be so straightforward and superficial. After a slight shock, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Xianxia, you are a person who is more interested than ordinary people. Come and have a seat, please." He reached out to lead, and Xuanwu clenched his fists before entering the Falling Flower Pavilion and sitting opposite the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man reached out and poured Xuanwu a cup of tea, saying, "It's not really good tea, but it's better than novelty. A while ago, an old friend came from the far north of the eastern wilderness, which is extremely cold and does not produce tea. However, there is a strange plant called zolihong. The colder the weather and the colder the ground, the more vigorous it grows. Some locals use the method of brewing tea from the eastern wilderness to make it, and surprisingly, it's good. Xianxia, you can give it a taste." Xuanwu took the tea cup and smiled. "Have you yet to ask the senior for his surname?" It's not mine anymore." The middle-aged man chuckled lightly and said, "My surname is Su. In my early years, I learned a few somersault moves from my predecessor Yuan, and I also wandered in the martial arts world. People in the martial arts world gave bandits the title of mountain crossing hands. However, the storms in the martial arts world were too fast, and in a few years, my heart was exhausted. I decided to retire to the mountains and forests, which can be considered as enjoying wealth and prosperity. It turned out to be Senior Su, a mountain climber who has been admired for a long time." Xuanwu quickly clenched his fists. Of course, that's how it is said. In fact, he didn't believe a single word that this person said. He has never heard of the name Mountain Flipper before. Although it can be said that Xuanwu is ignorant, and does not know a real person in front of him, this person is by no means the kind who retreats to the mountains and forests to enjoy wealth and prosperity. Otherwise, how could one be busy preparing for a brocade box? The middle-aged man surnamed Su smiled lightly and said, "You're welcome. With my humble reputation, where is it worth admiring by others?" That's what he said, but his face was beaming with joy, as if he was truly pleased by Xuanwu's praise. Xuanwu couldn't help but admire his words and expressions. Although he had a different set of ideas in his heart, this person's speech and behavior, even the small movements at the end of his fingers, were exactly the same. It can be said that nature is flawless. If it weren't for the presence of him and a few other people in the forest, Xuanwu would probably have truly believed this person's words. From this, it can be seen that the treacherous nature of the martial arts world often lies in people's hearts. The danger in people's hearts is the evil of the martial arts world. Perhaps when I was young, I had never truly experienced the vastness of the martial arts world. Over the years, every time I think about it, I feel regretful. Therefore, I particularly value young heroes who wander in the martial arts world. That's why I took the liberty of inviting you to have a talk. Please don't blame me, Xianxia. Su will compensate you first. As the words fell, he stood up and bowed, but his demeanor was upright and sincere. Su helped and said, "Senior, thank you very much." The middle-aged man surnamed Su's eyes twitched slightly, and then he smiled and said, "Young Xia, it's okay if you don't mind. Come on, have some tea." Su picked up his teacup and pretended to drink, but then paused slightly. Speaking of which, there is something that I really don't understand, and I would like to ask the senior to clarify. Oh. Let's hear it. Although my whereabouts are not secretive, I have never informed anyone when I came here. The senior not only knows my surname Su, but even describes my appearance in uniform and attire without distinction. However, I don't know from whom I came to know. Su put down his teacup and looked up at the middle-aged man, with a hint of exploration in his eyes. The middle-aged man's surname Su did not have any accidents and chuckled lightly. "I knew you were curious about this, young Xia, but..." He spoke in a pensive tone and picked up the teacup as a gesture. Su just smiled and remained silent. "Hey." The middle-aged man's surname Su sighed lightly and said, "Anyway, since the young hero insists on asking, I can't help but say. It's just because a day ago, by the side of the wild road and in the forest, I once saw the young hero's divine power with my own eyes. This is just a desperate attempt." Su suddenly changed color and looked for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, but he heard the middle-aged man's surname Su chuckle lightly. "Young Xia, your physical strength is amazing, and you are also cautious enough. This consideration alone is incomparable to ordinary beginners in the martial arts world. However, now that the time is around, do you feel that your body is a bit weak?" Su furrowed his brows slightly and his face became increasingly gloomy. "It's impossible, I haven't taken a sip of this tea," he said, "Ha, it's not wrong to be cautious when entering. However, in the martial arts world, there are so many experts and millions of supernatural powers, and they are not just limited to mere items in the cup." He pointed to the incense burner next to the guqin and said with a smile, "Is this incense burner comfortable for you, young hero?" Su grinned and said, "Is the fragrance poisonous? But are you safe and sound?" "Naturally, the antidote has been taken in advance." The middle-aged man's surname Su stood up and became complacent for a moment. Hu Piao said he had countless means, but Zhou Chef was the first to take the lead. "Although I don't know how you passed Zhou Chef's hurdle, since you can come to this Wang Township, you can't escape from my five-finger mountain. Boy, your physical strength is truly shocking. Even if I am facing you directly, I am not sure. This is the only way to make you surrender. Nowadays, if you don't want to die, you better listen to what the old man says." "I see, you also came for that brocade box." Su gave a bitter smile and said, "I just said, there's no such thing as pie falling from the sky. Someone invited me to eat and sleep for no reason. It turned out that there was something else I wanted to do. Now, I'm in a desperate situation. But before I die, there's something I don't know and I want to die to understand. I dare to ask, Your Highness, what exactly is inside that brocade box?" Chapter 8. The Xuanwu Warehouse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You are very insightful, knowing that resisting in a corner is meaningless. However, you can rest assured that as long as you listen, I may not kill you. The person gave a faint smile and said, "As for the things in the brocade box, it doesn't matter if I tell you, but what do you exchange it for?" Xuanwu was taken aback and said, now that I have reached such an ending, what can I keep? However, the next moment, he suddenly realized. Do you want my martial arts? In the forest, this person witnessed Su Mo's 2 fingers breaking the blade, throwing his hand and flying out, stabbing a knife that pierced through a person's neck, and even able to penetrate 3 large trees in a row. This strength is truly somewhat shocking. It is only natural to be tempted and want to own this kung fu. That's also why the other party used poison, but only wanted Xuanwu to lose his fighting power, rather than directly killing someone to silence him. Talking to smart people is a pleasure. The person sat down again and picked up the teacup, saying, actually, this tea is non-toxic. After taking a sip, he said, do you agree or disagree? Do I still have a reason to refuse now? Xuanwu sighed and said, I don't ask you to spare my life, I just want to die quickly. Haha, if it weren't for our different positions, with your temperament, I would have wanted to be an unforgettable friend with you. The person said this, but remained slightly silent. After a moment, he finally spoke up and said, the thing in that box is called Xuanjiko. After careful consideration, Xuanwu realized that there was absolutely no record of this in the letter. For a moment, I was a bit confused, and the confusion on my face was completely from within. You are young and have limited knowledge, so naturally you have never heard of this thing. The person said indifferently, but, you should have heard of it, the Great Xuanwu Library. Xuanwu frowned slightly and said, isn't that just a legend? Hundreds of years ago, the world was different from today. There was a dynasty with the name Xian. The Great Xian dynasty had a strong national power, relying solely on its own efforts to suppress the current world. Under heaven, there were no royal lands, and no royal officials leading the land. Even the most rebellious martial arts masters and powerful martial arts sects would have to bow down and submit under this royal power. It is said that during the reign of Emperor Xuanzong, he personally led 7 expeditions in the rivers and lakes, collected martial arts from all over the world, and became a state-owned entity. As a result, he established a large arsenal, which not only contained countless divine skill secrets, but also countless rare treasures. It can be said to be the undisputed #1 treasure trove in the world. However, there has never been an unbeatable master in this world, nor has there been an eternal dynasty. Even if one is as powerful as the Great Mystery, there will eventually be a day of decline. Overnight, the monarchy crumbled, and some people said it was a return of qi to the martial arts world, but this opened up centuries of disputes in the martial arts world. Over the past few hundred years, numerous warlords have risen up in the martial arts world, governing through separatism and endless disputes. There has never been another dynasty that unifies the world, despite its division and integration. This also led to the prevalence of martial arts in the world, but scholars were depressed and unable to achieve their goals. That's also why when Xuanwu said to Li Yishu, wishing Brother Li a bright future, Li Yishu smiled bitterly inside. And in between, there are also many legends passed down in the world. The most popular and desirable among them is the saying of the Great Xuanwu Reservoir. Not only because of its legendary origins and traceable history, there is also a saying that goes around. Those who obtain great mysteries will gain the world. For a moment, there were indeed many people who were moved by this. Unfortunately, after one bloody battle after another, it ultimately ended in nothing. Not only has no one obtained this great Xuanwu library and obtained the miraculous treasures inside, but even the non-existent great Xuanwu inventory has been marked with countless questions. Over time, many people simply regarded this thing as a legend in the martial arts world. Unexpectedly, this brocade box was implicated in this matter. This actually explains why the young swordsman must have killed himself that day. This matter is shocking, and if there is any leakage, we must erase the beginning and end, and never leave any trace. Otherwise, it would be a huge trouble. Legend. Legend is not rootless water. Wind comes from an empty hole, how can it be without cause? The intermediary who claimed to be surnamed Su chuckled lightly and said, all right, that's enough for you to know. Now, it's your turn. Talking about the great Xuanwu library, you want to pit my martial arts skills. Su Mo's mouth twitched and said, this is a bit too easy, isn't it? I thought you were a smart person, but now it seems that I overestimated you. Although most of what I said earlier was to deceive you, there is one sentence that is not false. I really have a palm technique called flipping mountain palm. Of course you can't really raise your hand to climb the mountain, but if you want to crush your bones, it's easy to catch. At this point, he suddenly handed out his palm and rushed toward Su Mo's shoulder with a fierce wind. At this meeting, he still had no intention of killing. After all, with Su Mo's death, his martial arts skills had no place to stand. He wanted to find the legendary Xuanwu warehouse, and the difficulties along the way were self-evident. With the help of divine skills, he would definitely achieve twice the result with half the effort. As for Su Mo, is there any reason to turn over the fish and meat on the chopping board at www.zhaozuiyuan.com? Unexpectedly, Su Mo, who was already lying soft on the stone table, suddenly smiled and immediately grew up. With the same palm, even before the other person could react, the two palms had already collided fiercely. Upon hearing only a roar, the person's expression was stunned, and he felt a powerful internal force that could not be resisted. With an unreasonable momentum, it rushed into his own meridians, crushing them all the way. Wherever it passed, the meridians were broken inch by inch. However, in just one breath, as I wandered around my body, my meridians were clearly broken. Following closely, the whole person was like a rag bag, flying backwards, 3 zhang away. After landing, the remaining force was inexhaustible, flipping and rolling out more than a zhang away. Only then did the momentum stop under the obstruction of a peach tree. So much so that the peach tree swayed incessantly, as if it had been greatly frightened. Su Mo looked at his palm and gently shook his head. I overestimated you. Within the forest, he broke the blade between his 2 fingers and threw it back with an astonishing force. But I didn't know that this was already the result of Su Mo's intentional control. And without knowing the depth of the opponent's martial arts, Su Mo exerted 30% of his strength, but he didn't expect to still hit the opponent as if he were not a human. More or less, it is indeed a bit overestimating the other party and underestimating oneself. His 13 great and perfect dragon Elephant Prajnaparamita Gong, whether in terms of internal strength or physical strength, cannot be said to be unparalleled in the world, but there are by no means many who can shoulder it. The person in front of us obviously cannot be compared to it. 30% of its internal strength is enough to strike it like a dead dog. Chapter 9. Speculation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The person who claimed to be surnamed Su actually had a real name that Su Mo didn't even know. After stabilizing his figure, he immediately turned over and sat up. Originally, it was a magnificent appearance, but now it is completely unrecognizable. Rolling and flipping on the ground naturally won't be gentle, with a blue nose and swollen face, bleeding along the corner of the mouth. Opening the mouth to speak, the words didn't come out, but one mouth spewed out a big mouthful of blood. Looking up again, Su Mo had already arrived at his doorstep. This is not. Maybe. He struggled to speak and said, you. Unless you have reached the realm of profound internal skills, it is impossible for you to turn a blind eye to this bone-etching fragrance. Is it a bone-etching fragrance? Su Mo nodded and said, what exactly is this bone-etching fragrance like, and what is my internal strength like? Let's not mention it for now. How can you be so sure that I have been poisoned by this fragrance? What? The person sitting on the ground suddenly had round eyes, almost unable to believe his ears. Su Mo smiled and said, medical experts use poison, which is said to be unpredictable. If 1 or 2 completely non-toxic things are placed around, they can form the world's absolute poison. Since you say I am careful, how can I just be careful of what is in this cup? A tale of ancient Qin and a furnace of incense look elegant, but under your hidden evil intentions, I naturally have to be wary of you hiding knives under the Qin, arrows in your sleeves, and poison in the incense. To be honest, before I stepped on this flower pavilion, when I saw the incense, I didn't take a breath. In terms of internal skills, I can barely be considered as having 3 points of proficiency, with only the ability to hold my breath, and I can still persist for a moment or 3. The person in front of him suddenly had a pale face. He thought of Xuanwu being careful, but didn't realize that he was not just careful with that cup of tea. He is careful in every aspect. Having excellent martial arts skills and being cautious to this extent, today's defeat is truly justified. He gave a bitter smile and said, "You. How do you know that I harbor evil intentions? Guess I'll tell you or not." Xuanwu smiled and said, "All right, let's stop talking nonsense. I'll just ask you one question. Is there anyone else besides you who knows about this mysterious mechanism and the great Xuanwu warehouse?" The person's expression was drowsy, and his thoughts were clearly in disarray. He did not catch the information revealed in Sumo's words, only gave a dismal smile. "If you want to kill, why say so much? Anyway." Sumo's words fell and he hit the heavenly spirit with a backhand palm. With a clicking sound, the person's eyes instantly dissipated, devoid of any divine light, and the corpse fell to the ground. At this point, Xuanwu naturally acted ruthlessly. On the one hand, he doesn't feel that he has any personality charm, and can make his opponents bow down and die for himself from then on. On the other hand, just now between the palms, this person had already suffered a complete breakdown of all his meridians. Even if it didn't give him any pleasure, it was just a brief reprieve of his life, and ultimately it was a dead end. Lastly and most importantly, this mess here has reached this point, but the people hidden outside have not moved at all. Between brushing his sleeves, Xuanwu turned around and walked away. After a slight turnaround, it had already come to a stop. On the peach tree in front of him, there was a person leaning diagonally against it. The person's heart was pierced by a knife, and the blade was nailed to the trunk. It even penetrated through the trunk, causing blood to drip from the tip of the knife onto the ground, blending with the soil. Xuanwu also knows this person. It was this young man who brought him to the falling flower pavilion from Wangxiang Tower. A moment ago, this person was still alive and kicking, but his kung fu skills were already lying dead on the spot. Not only him, he just walked around in this peach blossom forest. It can't be said that there are corpses everywhere, because these people are either lying or leaning, and they are all properly placed. The only thing is that all of them died. I and that person were scheming in the flower falling pavilion, but outside there were people killing each other. Judging from this technique, it is no different from the person in the tea shop who died in the same way. Xuanwu turned around and walked back towards the falling flower pavilion, pondering as he walked, today's meeting was certainly about the other party wanting to take me, obtain the brocade box, and gain my martial arts skills. However, I also used it to inquire about secrets with the other party. Although the person's words were not many, especially before, most of them were lies. However, after seeing the situation, he spoke a few words of truth. Chef Zhou should be the one who died in the tea shop, and as for Hu Piapiao, if nothing unexpected happens, she is the only woman among them. Unless a man would also call her by such a name. What they are plotting is the mysterious buckle in this brocade box, and they are decisive and ruthless in their actions, not allowing for any negligence. However, from their way of doing things, they are each fighting on their own, clearly having ulterior motives. But the most important thing has not been answered. Xuanwu asked the last question to the person, but it was precisely because of the death of the cook Zhou. Chef Zhou died, and Xuanwu easily got through his hurdle. Now he has arrived at the Falling Flower Pavilion and found the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to solve the biggest problem. In addition, these hidden small troubles around him have also been solved. It is obvious that there is another person outside here who is prying into this matter. Are those two people last night? Xuanwu once again came to the corpse where his meridians had been broken by his own shock. He looked at the corpse and raised his eyebrows lightly, saying, not very similar. Those two people, one using a stick and the other using a sword. The person using the sword, sitting and lying, is like a sword with its blade unsheathed, obviously extremely skilled in swordsmanship. While it is not impossible for such a person to kill with a knife, the possibility is definitely not high. No one can underestimate a swordsman's persistence in swordsmanship. As for those who used sticks, their bodies were full of alcohol, and these bodies had just died without any alcohol, so they probably had little to do with these two people. The people in the dark have killed Cook Zhou one after another, and then killed and cleared the siege in this peach blossom forest. Isn't it really Wang Xiangling's lineage? Or is there another reason? By the way, who exactly is Wang Xiangling? Su Mo's thoughts reached this point, staring at the corpse but suddenly remembered something. He immediately put on his deerskin gloves and squatted down to search for the body. After a moment, he was overjoyed. This is the real big harvest. At this moment, he had an extra stack of silver bills in his hand, scattered to the point of over 100 taels. You still carry so many silver bills when you go out to kill someone. You deserve to be killed and searched for your body. Xuanwu carefully checked the silver bill before putting it in his luggage and collecting it. As for the other things carried by this person, there was no movement, and the poison and antidote were not labeled. Distinguished by color, Xuanwu didn't know what they were all, so he took them rashly and didn't know how to use them, which would harm him. Chapter 10. Delivery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After receiving the silver bill, Xuanwu couldn't help but feel regretful at the last glance at the body. Unfortunately, it's not this person, but when those people died earlier, he didn't search for their bodies. This will cost a lot of money. Although it seems like a great hero wandering the rivers and lakes often disdains this yellow and white object. But Xuanwu is not that kind of person. Money is a good thing, naturally more is better, especially when he has an escort agency to take care of. This thing is even more precious. There are a total of 4 people appearing in the forest, but now 2 have died. The remaining one is a man and one is a woman. The situation of the man is still unknown, and the woman's name is Wuxia Piao. Why haven't I heard of any of these people? To wander in the world, one naturally has fame and fortune to pursue. Interests come from all over, and they are diverse. But fame is a signboard for wandering the rivers and lakes. Although Xuanwu has just entered the martial arts world, he is not unprepared. He has dabbled in everything that can be called a famous name in the martial arts world and what can be spread. Unfortunately, whether it was the flipping palm in front of him or the Wuxia Piao, he had never heard of them. Turning around and heading towards the outside of the peach blossom forest, he continued towards the gymming post. There is no communication with the other few people on this mountain flipping palm. It can be seen that they are indeed fighting on their own. However, each of them is secretly scheming, yet they collude with each other. Don't you really worry that this mysterious trap has fallen into the hands of one of them, but this person doesn't mention it to them. I expect there will still be some means of mutual restraint. It's just that these people are secretly connected, and their intentions are quite remarkable. The specific means of balancing each other are not something that Xuanwu will be able to figure out for a while. After learning about the situation of this mysterious deduction, Xuanwu didn't want to get involved in this conflict. Nowadays, all of this is a last resort. After the things are delivered, I only hope to escape smoothly and smoothly. As Xuanwu had anticipated, the situation might become even more mysterious in the future. After all, each of the 4 had their own means. 2 have gone now, but there are still 2 left. Although it's just 2 people, it contains infinite variables. On the one hand, Xuanwu still doesn't know how these 4 people colluded through any means. In the Falling Flower Pavilion, although the person claiming to be surnamed Su did not know that Chef Zhou had died prematurely, did the remaining two people know that he and Chef Zhou had already set foot in the underworld. If known, the subsequent measures may become even more intense and difficult to defend against. If you don't know, then at least you have to have different means waiting for yourself. What's particularly concerning is what's going on with this hidden killer. This person's goal is not themselves, but they may have helped themselves overcome obstacles if not possible, but this method is ruthless, yet it puts oneself on fire. And is there any connection between the old and young people who appeared that night and this matter? All of this has intertwined into a tangled mess, and it is necessary to make the subsequent changes in the situation even more chaotic. But Su Mo never expected that he just arrived at Jimming Post directly. There were no more disturbances along the way. No one pretends in the tea shop, waiting for themselves to step into the trap. No one even invited themselves to dinner in advance, with the purpose of holding on to themselves and demanding martial arts skills to snatch the brocade box for the latter. Su Mo was actually quite disappointed. After all, this journey has added a lot of costs as people eat and chew. If there are people treating people to meals everywhere, not only can it save a lot of money, but it can also help you eat and sleep well. What do you mean, if you treat someone, they won't let them eat anything, right? Unfortunately, Su Mo only experienced this kind of good thing once. At this moment, he was already standing in front of the Yuchuan Inn. After hesitating for a moment, he still stepped inside. "Dear guest, would you like to take a break or stay in the hotel?" As soon as he entered the door, the younger brother warmly welcomed him out. "Find someone." Su Mo smiled and said, "Second brother, could you please ask if there is an old man named Wang Xianlin in this shop?" "Ah." The younger brother was taken aback for a moment, but still nodded and said, "There is indeed such a king. How about you sit down and have a cup of tea first, and I'll go up and ask you a question." "Okay, excuse me." Su Mo was also very polite and sat down under the guidance of the younger brother. A pot of clear tea was already in front of him in the blink of an eye. I picked up the tea cup and took a slight look, then poured a little more into the cup and gently shook it. After pouring out the tea, I finally poured another cup and took a sip to moisten my throat. With a gentle movement of his ear, he heard several servants whispering secretly next to him. "I'm here again to find that Mr. Wang. Isn't it? I don't know exactly who this Mr. Wang is. 2 or 3 people have already arrived in the past few days. Speaking of which, the man who came to find this Mr. Wang before seemed extremely scared when he left. What's that? I didn't see that woman come out. Later, when I went into the room to serve, I didn't see any trace of that woman." Su Mo lowered his head to drink tea, listened to all these conversations in his ear, and as he gently lowered the teacup, the little second brother who went upstairs to inquire had already returned. "This guest, Mr. Wang, please find the book garden at www.zhaoxuan.com. The younger brother smiled and said, "Number 1 in the sky, turn left on the 2nd floor and walk to the end. You can do it yourself. Thank you very much." Su Mo clenched his fists and climbed up the stairs. In the blink of an eye, I was already standing in front of the door of the first room with that name. I gently knocked on the door, and a sound came from inside. "Come in." Pushing open the door, I saw a middle-aged man holding a book in his hand, his eyes all drawn to the content of the book. The other hand was holding a teacup, but forgot to drink it. "Are you Wang Xianlin?" Su Mo looked at this person and asked. The person looked up at Su Mo as well, seeming somewhat dissatisfied with his disturbance. They frowned and said, "I'm not, are you?" Then naturally I'm not." Su Mo smiled and said, Su Mo, the head of the Xiang escort agency, have been entrusted by someone to bring you something." "What is it?" Upon hearing these words, Wang Xianlin glanced at Su Mo and said, "What is it?" Without hesitation, Su Mo took out the brocade box and placed it on the table. Wang Xianlin's gaze was originally casual, but when he saw the brocade box, his eyes changed slightly and he said, Suddenly, he looked up at Xuanwu and said, "Where is the person who asked you to bring this brocade box?" "Dead. Dead." Wang Xianlin was stunned, put down his books and teacups, and reached out to get the brocade box. However, the next moment, Xuanwu placed his hand on the brocade box. "What do you mean by this?" Wang Xianlin furrowed his brows and looked at Xuanwu. However, Xuanwu was even more serious and said word by word, "Give me the money first."